Well, you're talking about reforming ICE or ICE, yeah, which I'm sure everybody would agree with. But even when we go back to like the number back in 2018 was only a quarter of Democrats. This is during like the peak anti-Trump kind of pro-immigration wave, that pendulum swing. It was only a quarter of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. That's not to say that they had a favorable opinion of ICE. It says 57% of Democrats viewed the agency negatively for obvious reasons. There was like family separation at the time. It was horrible. But when AOC is asked this question, she's going to have to give like a substantive answer for what that actually looks like. And
look, I hear your concerns on the political point. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it will be popular by the time we get to the end of like the horrors of this administration. I can just tell you that I think they've been vindicated and I think they were correct. I think it's a rogue agency. And this gets back to like the
Vanguard will be there, sir.
Yeah, let's do Crystal Ball. Let's shout out to KB, good friend of the show. She went on Live and Learn.
Yeah, shout out to Crystal for stopping by Live and Learn, which is a live stream hosted by our friend of the show, Josiah, who obviously is the creator and host of the Pondering Politics channel. Either way, let's take a look here. I thought Crystal did a great job on this. And yeah, shout out to Josiah. Like I said, big fan of Pondering Politics. We've had our beef with Hutch. I don't know if any of you guys remember that episode, but that was pretty funny.
Hutch tried to come after me the other day because I tweeted that Joe Biden should have canceled student debt, and he was like, excuse me, bro, did you know that the Supreme Court shot that down? And I was like, bro, if you never heard of executive orders, that thing that Donald Trump's using all the time to destroy our fucking country, use your brain, dummy.
Either way, we have mostly positive feelings towards the people on this panel besides Hutch, who, like I said, we've had some beef with, but I thought this was a good setting for Crystal to enter. Obviously, these guys are unabashed liberals. They're not as left-wing necessarily as us. But I was like, that'll make for an interesting dynamic. It's not just Crystal talking to people that she agrees with on everything. That would be boring, right? So, made for some potential friction. Let's see if any of that develops. And I think Crystal did a great job here. Really defending not only some of the more radical left-wing politicians like AOC, but also some of their messaging, some of which in particular has been quite vindicated. So let's take a look at this, Zach.
Do you think, speaking of AOC and
important, and on all those fronts, I'm actually pretty hopeful.
Do you think, speaking of AOC and obviously Accountable with Pisco, if you have questions, go ahead and jump in. But on the topic of AOC, do you expect that she will try to challenge Chuck Schumer in 2026, or that she'll keep her powder dry for a presidential run in 2028? Because people have been speculating about both. And I'll say, just as far as Schumer's concerned, there's at least some preliminary polling indicating that she might do pretty well against him.
I think she would.
Schumer's up in 28. In 28, he's up.
Oh,
that's what I thought.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I thought it was 26.
I don't know. I don't have any special insight, but I suspect she's probably positioning to run for president, would be my guess. And especially with, you had the thing that really convinced me. I don't know if you guys saw a few weeks back, she put out some like highly produced, almost like
Video
presidential
from
launch
Idaho.
video that had Bernie Sanders really
We
like
talked about that.
kind of endorsing her. He's clearly handing the movement off to her. And I'm someone who up until very recently, I would have been extremely skeptical of that for her. I think she went too far in the direction of like, the woke language and the faculty, like all the kind of like off-putting focus on identity politics. I think she went too far in that direction. I think she has really stepped into the void in a way that has impressed me.
Why does Hutch look like he's been holding his breath since she started talking? I'm sorry, Hutch. I don't mean to just come for you like this, but I'm like, Jesus Christ, bro.
Zach hasn't even been paying attention to anything Crystal said. He's just been hyper focused on Hutch.
It's just that meme of the guy who's like trying to hold in a cough, at the lunch table. It's
or a
like,
fart. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's interesting. He looks pissed. He doesn't look like he's a fan of Crystal.
no, he's definitely not. He's a little Destiny fucking sicko fan.
Direction. I think she has really stepped into the void in a way that has impressed me in Trump 2.0, in a way that not many people have. I think the messaging has been spot on. Clearly, the energy is there. And so, I'm more intrigued by that for her than I would have ever expected to be.
Well, with Kamala, I feel like that was arguably her biggest problem, is because she was clearly pivoting to the center, but she had this established, like she ran like to the left of Bernie Sanders in 2020, and a lot of people felt like her shift was disingenuous. That was the perception. And so for someone like AOC, there are so many other like quotes of her, taking these like very left-wing positions. like if that was the thing that did in Kamala, what is AOC going to have to do to sort of like shed that baggage?
Well, I would say they're very different characters. I mean, just in terms of political.
Before Crystal answers, I was just gonna say that's not what did in Kamala. Her being like too left wing is definitely not what did her in. If anything, not having any ideological fucking belief or policy to run on in the first place is what did Kamala in. Like throughout the campaign, people were like, what the fuck are you even running on? Remember, it was like Kamala for the people, but there was no like actual policy behind her campaign in the way that Bernie had policies, in the way that other people, Andrew Yang had UBI. Kamala wasn't running on anything other than just like, I'm a generic progressive that also happened to be a prosecutor.
Yeah, in 2020, absolutely by no metric was she running to the left of Bernie Sanders. For one, okay, she might have used more woke language, and Crystal charitably just like brushed that aside. But that's obvious lunacy to begin with. On the other side of that, could you imagine being a person who defended her parading out Liz Cheney and said that was strong, sage advice from her campaign staff, and then turn around 5 months after, or 6 months, 7 months, however long we are after election, and say, oh, she ran too far to the left? Are you freaking kidding me, Hutch? Use your brain. Use your brain. You didn't consult with Destiny because he didn't fucking give you these bullshit talking points. He would have done at least something a little more clever.
To do to sort of like shed that baggage?
Well, I would say they're very different characters. I mean, just in terms of political talent, I think anyone would have to acknowledge like they're not even in the same
100%.
league. In understanding of media and the new media ecosystem, they're not even in the same league. And then the other thing is with
and perceived
Kamala,
authenticity, not to interrupt, but perceived authenticity too. That
correct.
A lot of like Trump supporters, like it's a phenomenon, with the split voter between AOC and Trump. People say that although Trump's the biggest liar in out of any politician in modern history, they see that these people are genuine.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think that is the key point, because people with Kamala, she's just like, even within her own campaign in 2020, you say she ran to the left of Bernie Sanders. It's like, well, which part of the campaign are we talking about? She launched being like, I'm for Medicare for all. And then some donors were like, well, don't do that. And she's like, I'm not for Medicare for all. It was very obvious that her goal was to get herself into office, and that
she only raised her hand for Medicare for all half-assed and then immediately took it down. And it was Bernie Sanders left alone saying that he wanted, the legitimate, actual, authentic Medicare for all package.
Yep, 100%. And even Tulsi then eventually changed her plan to be like single payer plus or whatever the fuck.
She did that. Mine's based off the Australian tiered system, which is kind of dog shit.
Probably still better than ours.
Oh, way better than ours. But it's like, why would you start from scratch there? They created a tiered system where poor people get less quality healthcare. The whole point of universal healthcare is that everybody gets great, exceptional care because there's no tier system for it.
Yep. It is true though that Kamala did go through that brief period of hyper virtue signaling where she was like that was where that clip emerged of her saying that, yes, we should fund surgery for trans migrants at the border, the one they used against her in 2024. Like, it is true she went through like 6 months of like really performative virtue signaling. But again, the problem is not that she was saying left-wing positions, it's how obviously inauthentic it was. People were like, bro, you were just a cop. Like, you were just this fucking vicious.
You laughed at marijuana legalization.
Exactly.
You tried to put moms in jail.
Yeah, don't fucking pretend that now you're, I was, smoking doobies listening to Snoop Dogg.
I got Michael. Dude, do you remember when she lied about Snoop Dogg?
Yes, that's what I just referenced.
Yeah.
When she was in college before Snoop Dogg even like put out a single album.
Yeah,
hilarious. But either way, that's why she flopped. I actually do think that an authentic left-wing progressive could get away with saying a lot of kind of like bold, like, things that would sound unhinged to your average normie American, in the same way that Trump got away with doing that, but just in a fascist way. Again, it just has to be someone authentic, someone who's not obviously phony.
And the reason that Kamala Harris tried to present herself as like woke instead of somebody that was really committed to actual economic revolution like Bernie Sanders was because, one, Bernie Sanders had kind of taken the positioning that he was going to lean very much into class issues and, not like he always held it 10 toes down on LGBTQ issues, but it wasn't so much the focal point of his campaign. I think that Kamala Harris was trying to capture some of the energy that Bernie Sanders had behind him while making it a little bit more like corporate friendly, a little more like Silicon Valley pride flag coded. Not that standing up for LGBTQ rights isn't important, but
There's a way to do it in a cringy way to do it.
Exactly. And I think she often kind of felt on the cringy side, given the fact that we already know her history as top cop of California, etc.
Yup.
She didn't have a lot of core views that she was willing to fight for. And so I don't doubt, Hutch, that there will be, quotes from AOC, abolish ICE, although I think that was kind of vindicated in this moment, but that's another discussion. But, she has been out on a limb on all those issues. And I don't doubt that those are going to be things that she's going to have to grapple with in a primary. But I don't see her running away and completely like changing her whole, all her colors in this moment either. Like people feel like, okay, she's a progressive, like that's basically who she is. And so that authenticity piece I think is important. We actually, Josiah, did some focus group testing of those AOC Trump voters. And it was,
shout out to Griffin.
It was very, very interesting. A surprising number of them told us that they felt like there was just this sort of like general anti-establishment kind of a vibe of like, oh, they're both critical of their own parties. And then a lot of them actually talked about how they thought that they were pro-peace and anti-war, and that there was one woman.
I think it's really important that we grapple with all of this, because the way that online commentators, pundits, people like you guys in chat who really, really pay attention to politics, the way we analyze politicians, the way we look at issues, the way that we make our assessments is often very different than the way regular ass people who don't spend all of their time thinking about politics do. So when Crystal says here, like, oh yeah, they both kind of had this idea that, they were anti-war about them, right? Donald Trump will say, oh, we need to stop spending all of our money on war. AOC will say, oh yeah, of course I don't support this war, like free Palestine, all of these kinds of things. And if you're not actually familiar with what's happening in politics, you just think, yeah, most politicians are all liars. Yeah, most politicians are all corrupt. But hopefully they'll do this one thing that they keep talking about, and then you're done thinking about it. So it's like, I wanted the end of the war, so I voted for AOC. Donald Trump also said he'd end the war. I don't know about these other guys, so I didn't vote for them. Kind of a deal. That's how a lot of people process their decision making, which is interesting.
Well, and I think something we have to grapple with as much as we care about policy and Medicare for all and stuff, like, I think a lot of those voters, they like AOC more for her attitude and her vibe than any specific policy she represents. They like the fact that she's feisty. They like the fact that she speaks her mind. And again, that's the same thing they like about Donald Trump, is the fact that they kind of view him as feisty, and the fact that he speaks his mind, even though he's a fucking lying, degenerate piece of shit, right? But I think that is a big thing. Like, people really do like the attitude. They like charisma. It's a gut check thing. They don't give a fuck about necessarily what policies you're proposing. They give a fuck about, like, their perceived character. Not that people don't care about policy, obviously they do, but I'm just saying, like, look at Obama. He was actually pretty vague when it came to his political agenda. It's not like he really said a lot of specific plans, but he had this air about him that people were like, oh yeah, this guy is a change maker. He has a vibe that we are attracted to in the current moment. You know what I'm saying?
Oh no, that's actually a great point. What were the things that Obama ran on? Hope, change, healthcare reform. Right? What are we going to do?
In peace.
Oh, and peace. Yeah, you're right. That was a big thing, which he also didn't fucking deliver on. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize, and he took us to 5 new wars. It's absolutely insane that happened. But you're right. He would be like, hope, change. No. Do we believe that we can be greater than we are today? I do. I believe in change. I have hope for the country. And that was it, right? It was a nice idea. And he was a statesman. He was an obvious diplomat. He was so good on the mic. He just made you believe anything that he was saying if you wanted to believe it.
Yep. Left-wing Reagan.
Woman who's even telling us how, like, similar she thought AOC and Trump was, which is, hard for me to wrap my head around. But that was the feedback we got from these AOC Trump voters in her district.
Well, one thing
This is
I
in
think you all
Queens,
are
where she
forgetting,
outperformed Kamala, right?
Yes, dramatically. Yeah.
One thing I think you all are forgetting, though, is that she danced that one time, and it's on video. So sorry, guys. I think that's the end of her career. I mean, it's that, it's funny. I got thinking about that. Like, even just on stupid, superficial level, Trump's stupid dance that went viral and was imitated by like right-wing figures and whatever. I almost wonder if like AOC could even weaponize that, and like just like, totally like pull like an Aikido move and redirect the momentum about that. She just has so much natural talent and an ability to engage with people, I think, in an authentic way. So I'm excited to see where she goes. And plus, if you actually see her in congressional hearings, she's ferocious. Like, you can hear
sharp. Yeah.
You can hear the sphincters of the people she's about to question just clench shut.
And by the way, that's so true. And that's actually a big part of the reason why my tone towards AOC has become a little bit more positive, because I actually have watched some of those, and she does absolutely kick ass. She understands, like, she's like one of the few people that makes watching C-SPAN not boring as fuck. You know what I'm saying? And that's what leftists need in our politicians, because we have a lot of politicians who are good people, their heart's in the right place, they're serious people, but they don't know how to be telegenic. They don't know how to command a camera or a crowd. And I think AOC does. And it proves that she'll be great in like debate settings against these Republicans. If you actually watch some of these congressional hearings where she's really, asking tough questions, right? As Josiah is talking about, he's 100% correct. And it proves that she is a serious politician, not just, good social media star like some people want to reduce her to.
I mean, she's learned from Bernie Sanders, right? She spent a ton of time with that guy. And that is a guy that will not let you off the hook during a committee hearing. That is a guy that will not let you off the hook when you've been brought before Congress.
Terror as soon as they sit down. It's like, oh, fuck, and I mean, yeah, I just love it.
Just what I'm done with is like this useless consultant class that needs to like airbrush everything. They need to, workshop every answer like they did for Kamala, where you really feel like when you're asking or when Kamala's answering a question that she's going through all of the canned answers that this useless consulting class that gets paid millions and millions of dollars gave to her. I think they're useless. I would much rather trust like AOC on Instagram Live. I mean, we have that confidence that she can do those kinds of appearances and won't completely fuck it up. Whereas, do you have any confidence that Kamala Harris or Jerry Connolly or Joe Biden or any of the octogenarians, if we threw them onto Joe Rogan,
Jerry Connolly, RIP,
that they could perform? No, I think
he was dead
Rogan
already.
is calling for less consultants and more authentic
this was
people
last night, right?
Look at the camera and actually say
I'm
some
excited to
two
see
sentences.
Pelosi on Flagrant. I don't know what you're talking about. Back and forth.
I mean,
I actually would watch
unironically,
that.
unironically, though, I think that's a good litmus test. Like, if your candidate isn't prepared to sit down for like a 3-hour long form interview, then maybe they're not the move.
You
but-
supported
Not in
Joe
this era.
Biden.
Yeah,
Right.
not in this era.
Too much has changed. The landscape has just changed way too much. And I feel like that was like on full display in 2024 in a way that was not on display in any of the other years. It was just so important. But like, to the point of AOC, I can envision her stepping into a role like that. But I think like a lot would have to change between now and then. Because if we look at Donald Trump's numbers, they're not particularly great. But on immigration, I think he's still slightly above water. So if you have an electorate that's looking at Donald Trump's current policies right now, which I'm sure all of us agree are nightmarish, like dystopian in our minds, but when a slight percentage of the country views that favorably, like what needs to happen in the next like 4 years? Because there has to be some movement that starts like right now. Like there need to be
Yeah.
hearts and minds that are changed like right now.
I don't actually think that's correct about immigration. I'm sure it depends on the poll, but the average of polls that I saw has them even underwater on immigration at this point. And of course, it's highly dependent on what you're asking about, right? So if you ask specifically about the border policy, yes, that is one area where he's still above water. If you ask about Gilmar Abrego Garcia, you will
Right,
get some
yeah.
of the lowest numbers you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put in that caveat that, first of all, I think he is somewhat underwater, at least according to the polling that I was seeing recently on immigration. But then also it really dramatically matters about what you are asking people about with regard to his immigration policy.
Mhm.
In terms of what needs to happen, I mean, I think you are in some ways already seeing it. One thing that I think Democrats have lacked, and Kamala in particular, is Trump has his story of the world. I think it's an evil and untruthful story about how immigrants and trans people and the cultural elite are screwing you over, and that's why your life is a struggle, and that's why things are hard for you, or your community isn't what it used to be, or whatever your particular fears and concerns are. And I think the Democratic Party has failed to offer their own compelling version of that story. And I think Bernie and AOC have their version of that. And I think you've seen a grassroots organic response from Democratic base voters at this point, but more broadly as well. I mean, you see Bernie's response and the way he was received on the Flagrant podcast, et cetera. But they have a story that is coherent to people, that addresses a lot of those insecurities, that has the benefit of being much more accurate and much more beneficial in terms of, not demonizing people and locking them up in a foreign gulag for life with no due process. And I think that's a critical part of what it's going to take. And, you've got a lot of energy, grassroots energy. You have people who are looking for someone who's going to fight. I don't think you're going to have a problem rallying around a candidate next time. And look, hopefully we get there. I mean, I'm concerned about like what we're going to go through between now and then, and that we're going to even have elections that are free and fair. But hopefully the candidate will not be Donald Trump again. And I will say that I also feel somewhat hopeful, because I don't think anyone else has the unique type of horrible charisma, but incredible charisma that Donald Trump does and this hold on the electorate. I don't think a JD Vance pulls that off. I don't think a Don Jr. pulls that off, or whoever is the, the next anointed one.
Can we pause it?
So it's interesting because I do want to pick.
Love Crystal Ball so much. She always has it right on the money. We've been saying this on our show too, in our own way. One of the things we talked about a week ago when we were on the Letter Hack pod was how we need to embrace narrative, right? We are human beings. We like stories. We need to have a story that we're told. We need to have a mission. We need to have a goal. We need to feel like we're in pursuit of something that we could believe in. We have to believe that, we're in a sense like all on the same page, right? We have to have something that unites us. It's the same way that everybody gets excited when their favorite sports team plays. It's like the story behind it. You could talk about how money is its own story. It's mythology, right? It's pageantry. These are things that as human beings, we absolutely need. And that's what Donald Trump understood inherently, right? That's why he was able to weaponize the 24-hour news cycle, make it completely free for him. He understood reality TV. He understood that people wanted reality TV to be real life, even though they knew it wasn't. And he played all of those things into his hand. Bernie Sanders sold the story of nostalgia, but it was the nostalgia inverted. It was like, hey, here is the, if we had unions again, here is if we, increase the minimum wage. I think he could have done more playing into that at a time, but it was like, let me paint a completely new vision for what our society could be for you. Let's have an economic, cultural, political revolution where the working class no longer is left behind. Don't you remember the 1950s when you could make a living and go on vacation on the Ford assembly line as a worker? Now that's gone. That's because of the oligarchy. That's because the 1% owns everything, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, he didn't deny that things are like bad and getting worse. Like Hillary in 2016, she was like, what do you mean? America's awesome. We're the best country in the world. Don't say America's bad. And Bernie was like, yeah, this country needs to be fixed. And also Trump said that. That's what was so appealing, about both of them is they didn't gaslight people, because a lot of Americans, they feel that things aren't as good as they used to be for whatever reason. And, neoliberal candidates like Hillary Clinton wanted to gaslight people and deny that fact. Candidates like Bernie Sanders were willing to admit and acknowledge that there were problems that needed to be fixed. And that's what people want to hear is that, yeah, there is a problem, but it can be fixed. Not just like, oh, yeah, let's keep gaslighting you with this status quo nonsense. No, we actually do need to fix things. And that's what Bernie understood. And that's why he was so successful, So that's 100% correct. This is an interesting portion, too. They're going to talk a little bit about how a potential left-wing candidate like AOC will respond to the question of the border. And specifically, if they're asked about like open borders or abolishing ICE, how would they respond to that? So I think Crystal's answer here is really good, too.
Sweet.
To, in very plain language, make it abundantly clear that they don't believe in open borders. So I guess to focus more on what Hutch said, Crystal, what would you expect or like just off the cuff for somebody like AOC to do with that one area where Donald Trump has persistent popularity? Yes, I believe in secure borders, but like, what would you like to see from her or hear from her in a situation like that?
I mean, I think if you go back to the messaging that Democrats only, abandoned basically, that you have secure borders, you have a pathway to citizenship. And then I think you have to couple that with, I think it actually couples nicely at this point with real commitment to human rights and the rule of law, which is something that people have been deeply concerned with this Trump administration. On a practical level, one of the, and I'll let Pisco speak to this more than I can, but on a practical level, one of the things that you desperately need to do is surge the number of immigration judges, which if this administration was actually serious about adjudicating these, like, oh, we can't have 2 million trials. I mean, first of all, these are extremely perfunctory hearings. Like, they don't take a lot of time. And if you were serious about your plans here, you could increase the number of immigration judges. Instead, you've gone in the total opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of a little bit in the weeds. But I also think you have to keep in mind that America has never been more favorable towards immigrants than they were during Trump's first term. Because it's one thing to think in the abstract, like, yeah, there's probably some people here that, are committing crimes or taking jobs or whatever, and we should get them out of here. When you actually see the reality of the mom and the, of course, with this administration, like the U.S. citizen children with cancer who are being deported and what this actually looks like, people turn against it really quickly. So one of the things that has frustrated me is there's been this assumption that opinion on immigration is completely, static and unchangeable, and there's no way you can persuade people or move them. And I think Democrats really sort of, got scared and like completely capitulated to a right-wing narrative on immigration. I think that was a big mistake. And, you can already see
Yeah, I'm gonna find one more quick timestamp real quick. Zach, do you have anything to say on that while I do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, just that you can't fold on immigration, right? When people say we have an open border, we'll say we absolutely do not have an open border. Do you know how many people have applications that are outstanding to get into the United States? Do you know how difficult it is to immigrate legally? Do you know how many barriers there are? Do you not know that the Constitution and the American entire history as a nation has been predicated on allowing people to legally immigrate here? Do you know how that system has been completely destroyed? Right? We have to talk about that. The reality is what people are afraid of when they talk about immigration is they're afraid of the economy. Well, it's two things. They're afraid of more brown people coming to the country at times, and they're also afraid about the economy. And I feel like the best way to talk about immigration is to say, how come we have all of this animosity towards desperate people who are coming to America to just try and work hard, who want to pay their taxes? We have all this data about how much taxes people who are undocumented pay versus the amount of tax benefits they're able to receive because they're undocumented. We know that they're paying far more in taxes than they're taking out in benefits. That's just a fact, right? We could talk about why there's never any punishment for the people who own these major corporations that not just employ but continuously rely on undocumented workforce so that they can exploit them, so that they can pay them cash under the table, so that they can skirt the IRS with more tax dollars that belong to the government, right? We never see any takedowns against these guys. These are the kinds of things that the Democrats need to be prioritizing. We need to talk about how, hey, we need to stop making our domestic labor workforce compete with Mexico, compete with these dirt poor countries, and drive down the value of the American hour of labor, right? And so then, as you do that, you'll decrease the incentive for offshoring. You'll increase the penalty for hiring undocumented workers. Without being draconian and denying asylum, you can still go through all of the standard processes of allowing people to come in to the country. And I also think it is popular if you say, hey, you know what? If you've been in this country for a long fucking time and you are an American and you believe in all of this shit, well, guess what? Our country was founded on being open and embracing immigration. Give us you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, whatever the fuck the Statue of Liberty says. You know what I mean? We're going to embrace that. We want you guys to become naturalized citizens. We have to move the ball forward, because the last thing I'll say before we play what Crystal has to say is that at the same time, you have Republicans complaining about birth rates. You have Republicans complaining about population. You have people complaining about how, oh my gosh, we're not having enough families in this country. Well, guess what, dude? If you're worried about the population, great way to solve it. There's a bunch of people that want to come and live in America and work hard and have the American dream here.
Yeah, that's a great point. Although I have a feeling that's not going to resonate with a lot of the people that make that argument, Zach, for obvious reasons.
Potentially not.
Either way, this is a great answer about ICE specifically.
Enforcement agency, but like the shit we're seeing from ICE now.
I mean,
especially
ICE
under
was
Tom
created.
Homan.
ICE was created by the Bush administration. This is an organization that hasn't been around for 100 years or anything like that. I mean, it's not as if it's this crazy institution similar to the Department of Homeland Security, right? I mean, I think that what's troubling to me about ICE and why I think that abolish ICE language, I mean, on one hand, like you guys are kind of referencing, it could be popular at this point because ICE seems to be enacting so much crazy stuff, is that, look, as a government employee, whether you're a cop for the federal government or you're just a Social Security Administration worker, you have a duty to follow the law, right? You cannot follow illegal orders, even if it's from the president. The difficulty of being a federal employee and swearing an oath is that you might be in the awkward position of having to tell your boss, who might ultimately be the president, I'm not going to do this, right? And when I see video after video of groups of ICE officers and Homeland Security people just fucking blackbagging people, all those people need to be fired by the incoming administration, who's a Democratic administration, ideally, obviously.
Yeah.
These are people who they're saying, I simply don't give a shit about the law, right? And whether that means abolishing ICE or pulling a Doge and firing half of the ICE officers who are acquiescing to this ridiculous illegal immigration regime, something clearly radical needs to be done.
Well, you're talking about reforming ICE or ICE, yeah, which I'm sure everybody would agree with. But even when we go back to like the number back in 2018 was only a quarter of Democrats. This is during like the peak anti-Trump kind of pro-immigration wave, that pendulum swing. It was only a quarter of Democrats wanted to get rid of ICE. That's not to say that they had a favorable opinion of ICE. It says 57% of Democrats viewed the agency negatively for obvious reasons. There was like family separation at the time. It was horrible. But when AOC is asked this question, she's going to have to give like a substantive answer for what that actually looks like. And
look, I hear your concerns on the political point. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it will be popular by the time we get to the end of like the horrors of this administration. I can just tell you that I think they've been vindicated and I think they were correct. I think it's a rogue agency. And this gets back to like the the asymmetry between the Republicans and the Democrats. How many like Republicans just came in and slashed a bunch of agencies, and and we're like watching this one that is completely rogue, and everybody's terrified to say, hey, maybe we should do something about that. But they'll just come in, hey, kids in Africa.
And I was so glad to see Governor Tim Walz come out and correctly identify ICE as the modern day Gestapo the other day. He has the right approach. Just as Crystal said. And Hutch, meanwhile, manifests everything that is wrong with the Democratic Party. Well, we could do that, but in 2018, even at the height of the pro-immigration message, only 57% of Democrats felt unfavorably towards the organization. So therefore, we should probably tread lightly. No, fuck no. People need a bold message, and saying that we're going to not just reform ICE, but fucking abolish it, get rid of it, because they're the modern day Gestapo is the appropriate way to go about it. That's how Trump and the Republicans got power in their messaging. Democrats, it's long past due them, taking a page out of that book.
Yep.
We can watch a couple more seconds of this, but I know we have the Piers Morgan fired up and ready to go.
Oh yeah.
Africa who are going to die now because we just slash USAID, and they don't give a shit and they just keep moving. It's just wildly different over there in what the risks that they're willing to take, I guess, and the insane actions they're willing to do.
I think also the permission structure within and outside the party is one of my recurring theses on my channel, is just bitching about the double standard between the right and the left and their political proxies and the Republican and Democratic Party. And
Yep. And Josiah is 100% right to be upset about that. I was actually I was watching for the first time last night a film from 2006 called Old Joy. And it was set in 2006, obviously the Bush administration. And throughout the movie, occasionally in the character, in his car, he'll be listening to the radio. And I don't know what, podcast or radio, or not, I guess podcast didn't exist, but, he's listening to the radio, there's some liberals talking about shit. And it's like they were having the same fucking conversation that we hear constantly now about the Democrats, and how they can't properly stand up to the Bush administration, and how they always want to cower to the Republicans on messaging instead of really going after the corporate crooks like they should. It was like crazy. I'm like, no wonder people eventually get tired and tune out of this bullshit, because it's a never ending fucking carousel of just like the Democrats sucking and failing to meet the moment. It's wild. Great movie though. Definitely check that one out. It was really good. But yeah. And Josiah's 100% right to be upset about that. And, shout out to Crystal for coming in that Zoom call or that, live stream and basically making all those self-identified liberals, except for Hutch, maybe agree with everything she said. You know what I'm saying, Zach? And that's real proof. Like, not that I have anything against the folks over at Lib and Learn. I love Josiah, love Pisco. But, I think that's proof that self-identified liberals are for the most part embracing these radical ideas, these notions that, it's time for the Democrats to actually fucking go left.
Oh, 100%. And I even remember one time we were talking to Josiah, and he was like, I always considered myself a progressive until I started arguing with you guys. And then I was like, maybe I am a liberal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think he does get down with all of these progressive ideas. And I think the big albatross for liberals, the one thing that holds them back is
Hutch.
The Hutch mentality, the destiny mentality, which is, we can't do any of those things. That would be really good, but we can't do it. Oh, that would be why the Republicans do bad shit that is against the law all fucking day long. Okay, go ahead and do some good shit for America for once. For once. Like, would you steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving child? Yes, obviously. Wouldn't think twice about it. Try and get in my way to fucking stop me from feeding a starving child with this loaf of bread. You know what I mean? I don't give a fuck who it belongs to. What asshole society says gets to hoard all the fucking bread. Fuck that guy. I am feeding this hungry kid. That is the energy the left needs to bring.
Yep, 100%. And again, if this country survives the Trump administration, which is a big if, that might be the only silver lining, is that the Democrats finally learn to act out of line a little bit and, say fuck you to the parliamentarian or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Don't you think that if another Democrat ever, sees the Oval Office, they're going to be like, all right, clearly all that's been done away with. Let's actually legislate.
I hope. I pray to God, dude. I pray
Jesus
to God.
Christ.
I will be bleeding out of my ears on this show if they get the sticks again, and they won't even do a goddamn executive order to fix my student loan situation.
Oh, the parliamentarian. What are we going to do, bro? What are we going to do?
Like,
Imagine.
God damn it, dude.
We'd be like, are you fucking kidding me, bro?
The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir.